The day Cedric Malone walked into Northgate Capital Management, he wore the same charcoal blazer he'd worn to his daughter's college graduation 3 years before. Not because it was the nicest thing he owned, because it was the most honest thing he owned. A man who spent 22 years building financial models for municipal pension funds doesn't need to announce himself. Or so he believed. He was wrong about that. At Northgate, everything was an announcement. The lobby alone told you where you stood. Marble floors the color of old money. A reception desk staffed by a young woman with a headset and the practiced smile of someone paid to make certain people feel welcome and everyone else feel like they'd wandered through the wrong door. Cedric stood at that desk for a full 90 seconds before the young woman looked up. "Delivery entrance is on Fulton," she said. Cedric didn't flinch. He had a face trained by decades of rooms exactly like this one. "I'm here for the senior analyst position." 9 o'clock interview with Mr. Whitmore. She looked at her screen, looked back at Cedric, looked at his blazer. Name? Malone, Cedric Malone. She typed. The smile returned, smaller this time, recalibrated. "I'll let him know you're here." He sat in one of the low leather chairs near the window. Around him, the morning hummed. Young associates in fitted suits moved through the glass corridors with the energy of people who had never once doubted they belonged. Nobody looked at Cedric directly. They looked near him, the way you look near something you're not sure what to make of. That was the ecosystem at Northgate Capital. Cedric read it in 10 minutes. He'd seen it before. Not here specifically, but in the bones of it. The particular architecture of a place that had decided, long before you arrived, who mattered and who was there to fill a chair until someone better came along. He'd spent the better part of his career navigating rooms like this. Outwitting them, mostly. Outlasting them, always. But he was 51 years old now, and he was tired of outwitting. He just wanted to do the work. The work, for the record, was extraordinary. Cedric had built a risk assessment framework for the city of Baltimore that saved the pension fund from a $300 million collapse during the 2019 market downturn. He had published 2 papers in the Journal of Financial Economics. He had been quoted, anonymously, in the Wall Street Journal 4 times. He kept the clippings not out of vanity, but because there were rooms exactly like this one, where a man like Cedric needed receipts. Grant Whitmore came down at 9:17. He was 43, give or take, with the kind of face that photographed well for LinkedIn, and the handshake of a man who had learned somewhere that a firm grip was the same thing as character. "Cedric, great. Come on up." The conference room on the 14th floor looked out over the city. Whitmore gestured to the seat across from him, the one with its back to the view. Cedric noticed that. He sat down anyway. Across the table, beside Whitmore, sat a man Cedric had not been told would be there, Owen Farrell, head of portfolio strategy. 40, maybe 38. The kind of thin that comes from discipline rather than genetics. He was already looking at Cedric's resume with the particular expression of someone who has already made a decision and is doing the interview out of legal obligation. "So," Farrell said, not looking up. "Baltimore City Pension Fund. Municipal work." He said it the way a chef might say fast food. "That's a long way from what we do here." "It's exactly what you do here," Cedric said. "You manage risk on behalf of people who can't afford to lose what they've trusted you with. The only difference is your clients wear suits." Whitmore laughed. Farrell did not. The interview lasted 45 minutes. Cedric answered every question. He answered some of them in ways that made Whitmore lean forward and write things down. At the end, Whitmore shook his hand again and said, "We'll be in touch." Farrell did not shake his hand. He was already looking at his phone. Cedric took the elevator down alone. He walked through the marble lobby, past the reception desk, where the young woman didn't look up this time either. He stepped onto Fulton Street and stood in the September air for a moment, letting the city fill his lungs. He got the offer 2 weeks later. Not the senior analyst position, an associate role, 2 grades below what he'd applied for. The salary was $60,000 less than what the job posting had listed. The email from HR was 3 sentences long and included the phrase, "a great opportunity to acclimate to our culture." Cedric read it twice, forwarded it to his wife, Loretta. Then he called his old colleague, Vincent, who had referred him in the first place. "They do this," Vincent said, and the exhaustion in his voice was the exhaustion of a man who had watched this happen more times than he could count. "They see somebody like you and they think, we can get him cheaper. They think you need them more than they need you." Do they know what I built in Baltimore? They know. That's why they want you. They just don't want to pay for you. Cedric accepted the offer, not because he was desperate, because he had a plan. And because Owen Farrell, in the conference room on the 14th floor, had made the specific mistake of underestimating someone who had spent 22 years quietly being the smartest person in rooms that didn't know it yet. He started on the first Monday of October. The associates' floor was a different atmosphere from the 14th. Lower ceilings, longer hours, a refrigerator that someone had labeled communal, take only what is yours in passive-aggressive marker. There were 12 analysts on the floor. 11 of them were under 35. Cedric was the only black man. Nobody said anything about that. Nobody had to. His desk was next to a window that faced the building across the street. His monitor was 2 generations older than the ones his colleagues had. He requested an upgrade through IT. The ticket sat open for 6 weeks. The first thing Cedric noticed was the model. The firm's flagship risk model, the one that the entire portfolio strategy team ran every quarter to assess exposure. It was wrong, not catastrophically wrong. Wrong in the way that a slightly crooked foundation is wrong. Fine until you put too much weight on one side. He found the error on his 3rd day. A correlation matrix that didn't account for sector clustering during liquidity crunches. It was the kind of thing you'd miss if you'd only ever worked in equity markets. You wouldn't miss it if you'd spent 2 decades watching municipal bond portfolios collapse in slow motion while everybody congratulated themselves on their models. Cedric documented the error carefully. He cross-referenced it against 3 years of quarterly reports. He built a corrected version and ran it against historical data. The difference was not small. On a Tuesday morning in his 3rd week, he sent the corrected model to Grant Whitmore with a 2-page memo attached. Whitmore forwarded it to Farrell. Farrell replied to Whitmore only, in an email Cedric was not copied on, but that Whitmore, distracted or perhaps deliberately, forwarded back to the full thread. Where did he even get access to the master model? This is above his clearance level. Also, this is not how we do things here. Cedric read that email at his desk. He read it twice, the way he had read the lowball offer. He did not respond. He printed the email and put it in a folder. The folder went into his laptop bag. The laptop bag went home with him every night. He understood then what he was dealing with. Farrell wasn't protecting the model. Farrell was protecting his claim to the model. There is a specific kind of professional danger that comes not from incompetence, but from knowing more than the person who controls your access. Cedric had been in that danger before. He knew how to move through it. He stopped sending corrections to Whitmore. He started keeping a parallel record instead. Every quarter, he ran his corrected model alongside the firm's official one and noted the divergence. He timestamped every entry. He saved every version to a personal encrypted drive. He was not doing this out of spite. He was doing it out of the same instinct that had made him save every email in Baltimore, every meeting note, every decision memo. The instinct of a man who has learned that when things eventually go wrong, the person who kept receipts is the person who survives. Things went wrong in February. The market correction was not a crash, but it was sharp enough. 2 sectors that the firm's model had rated as low correlation moved in perfect tandem for 11 days. The flagship portfolio lost 4% in a single week. 4% sounds like a small number until you understand what it represents in terms of client assets. Then it is not a small number. Then it is a number that makes people in conference rooms very quiet. The post-mortem meeting was on the 3rd floor. Whitmore was there. Farrell was there. 3 members of the executive committee, including the firm's chief investment officer, a woman named Renata Good, who had the manner of someone who had been in exactly this room for exactly this reason before, and had not enjoyed it the first time either. 6 other senior staff. Cedric was not invited. He found out about the meeting from Vincent, who had heard from someone on the 3rd floor. Cedric was eating lunch at his desk when he got the text. He read it, finished his sandwich. Then he opened his laptop bag and removed the folder he had been building since October. He walked up to the 3rd floor. The conference room had a glass wall. Through it, he could see Farrell at the head of the table, pointing at slides. Cedric knocked once and opened the door without waiting. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, which was not entirely true. "I have something that's directly relevant to what you're discussing." Farrell's expression was the expression of a man who has been interrupted at the exact moment he least wanted to be interrupted. "This meeting is for senior staff." I know, Cedric said. He looked at Renata Good. Ma'am, I identified a structural error in the risk model in October. I documented it then. What happened last week was a foreseeable outcome of that error, and I can show you exactly how. The room was very quiet. Farrell said, "This is not the time or the place. The correlation matrix doesn't account for sector clustering during liquidity events." Cedric continued, speaking directly to Good. "I built a corrected version. I ran it every quarter since October. I have the divergence data. If you want to understand what happened and how to prevent it from happening again, I can walk you through it." He set the folder on the table. He had printed everything in order. The original memo from October, Farrell's forwarded email, 4 months of parallel model data, and a 3-page analysis of the February correction, showing exactly where the official model failed and where his corrected version had predicted the outcome within a margin of 0.5%. Good reached for the folder before anyone else moved. The room stayed quiet for a long time after that. Farrell was looking at the table. Whitmore was looking at his hands. Good turned pages. She did not rush. She had the manner of someone who reads carefully because she has learned that speed is how you miss things. When she reached the last page, she set the folder down and looked at Cedric for the first time with something other than the polite blankness of someone registering an unfamiliar face. "You've been here since October," she said. It was not quite a question. "Associate level," Cedric said. "I applied for the senior analyst position." Another silence, shorter but heavier. "Sit down, Mr. Malone," Good said. Farrell looked up then. "Renata, I don't think we need to. Owen." She said his name the way you say the name of someone you are done arguing with. "Sit down." Cedric sat. What followed was 2 hours and 40 minutes that he would describe to Loretta that night as the most expensive meeting they didn't know they were having when they started it. He walked the room through the model error, the corrected version, the October memo, the divergence data, and the February outcome. He answered questions from the executive committee. He answered them without notes, from memory, the way you answer questions about something you built yourself. Farrell asked no questions. He sat at the far end of the table with the stillness of a man watching a structure he built come apart from the foundation up. At 4:30, Renata Good asked Cedric to step outside while the committee spoke privately. He waited in the corridor for 11 minutes. A young assistant brought him a glass of water without being asked. He thanked her. When he went back in, the room had thinned. Good and Whitmore remained. Farrell was gone. "The associate title was a mistake," Good said. "I'm told the offer was structured that way." She did not say by whom, but the absence of Farrell's name in that sentence was its own kind of statement. "We'd like to correct that. Senior analyst, the original grade, the compensation the position was posted at. Effective the 1st of next month. And I'd like your corrected model to be the framework we use going forward, with your name on it." Cedric looked at her for a moment. 22 years of municipal pension work, 2 journal papers, 4 anonymous Wall Street Journal quotes, a folder he had been building since October because he learned a long time ago that the room doesn't always see you until you make it impossible for the room to look away. "I accept," he said. He drove home in the February dark. The city was lit up the way cities are after a market correction. Everybody who lost money making noise about it. Everybody who kept their footing staying quiet. Cedric was quiet. He had the radio off. He was thinking about the lobby on his first day, the young woman with the practiced smile, the chair with its back to the view. Loretta was in the kitchen when he got home. She had made the rice and beans she made when she knew a day had been long, because it was the meal that said, "I knew you'd need something real tonight," without her having to say it out loud. He sat at the table and told her everything. She listened the way she had always listened, without interrupting, without filling the silences, letting him find the shape of it in the telling. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Owen Farrell," she said. "What happened to Owen Farrell?" "He left before the meeting ended, and," Good didn't say, "but the model he's been putting his name on for 3 years has my corrections built into it now. Everyone in that room knows where the corrections came from." Loretta looked at him. "That's going to bother him every single day." "Yes," Cedric said. "It is." She served the rice. Outside, the February wind moved through the street. Inside, the kitchen was warm. This is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Not the moment in the conference room, not the corrected title, not even the money. Though God knows the money matters. And anyone who says otherwise hasn't had to make a call to a pension fund administrator on behalf of a 70-year-old retiree, whose nest egg just became a question mark. The part that doesn't get talked about is what it costs to be the person who keeps the folder. To sit at an associate desk for 4 months while someone else puts their name on work they didn't build. To send the memo and watch it get forwarded into a silence that tells you everything you need to know. To eat lunch at your desk and keep documenting, keep time-stamping, keep running the parallel model. Nobody asked you to run. Not because it will definitely pay off, not because you've been promised anything, but because you are someone who does the work correctly regardless of whether the room is looking. Cedric Malone knew what the room thought of him when he walked in with his charcoal blazer. He let them think it. He documented everything. He waited. The same floor where Owen Farrell once told a conference room that Cedric's access was above his clearance level is now running a risk framework with Cedric Malone's name attached to it in the methodology section. Every quarter, every report, every client presentation. The quietest person in the room is not always the one with the least to say. Sometimes they are the one who has already decided that when they finally speak, there will be nothing left to argue with.